Hello, this is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and we're up to chapter 3. On this particular Thursday, something was moving quietly through the ionosphere, many miles above the surface of the planet. Several somethings, in fact. Several dozen huge, yellow, chunky slab-like somethings. Huge as office buildings, silent as birds, they soared with ease, basking in electromagnetic rays from the star Sol, biding their time, grouping, preparing. The planet beneath them was almost perfectly oblivious to their presence, which was just how they wanted it for the moment. The huge yellow somethings went unnoticed at Goonhilly. They passed over Cape Canaveral without a blip. Woomera and Jodrell Bank looked straight through them, which was a pity because it was exactly the sort of thing they'd been looking for all these years. The only place they registered at all was on a small black device called a sub-etha-sens-o-matic, which winked away quietly to itself. It nestled in the darkness inside a leather satchel which Ford Prefect wore habitually around his neck. The contents of Ford Prefect's satchel, which were quite interesting in fact, would have made an Earth's physicist's eyes pop out of his head, which is why he always concealed them by keeping a couple of dog-eared scripts for plays he pretended he was auditioning for stuffed on top. Besides the sub-etha-sens-o-matic and the scripts, he had an electric thumb. A sort of squat black rod, smooth and matte, with a couple of flat switches and a dial at one end. He also had a device which looked rather like a large-ish electric calculator. This had about 100 tiny flat press buttons and a screen about 4 inches square on which any one of 1,000,000 pages could be summoned at a moment's notice. It looked insanely complicated, and this is one of the reasons why the snug plastic cover it fitted into had the words "Don't Panic" printed on it in large friendly letters. The other reason was that this device was in fact the most remarkable of all books ever to come out of the great publishing corporation of Ursa Minor, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The reason why it was published in the form of a micro sub-meson electric component is that if it were printed in normal book form, an interstellar hitchhiker would require several inconveniently large buildings to carry it around in. Beneath that, in Ford Prefect's satchel, were a few biros, a notepad and a large bath towel from Marks and Spencer's. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has a few things to say on the subject of towels. A towel, it says, is about the most massively useful thing an interstellar hitchhiker can have. Partly because it has great practical value. You can wrap it around you for warmth as you bound across the cold moons of Jaglan Beta. You can lie on it on the brilliant marble sanded beaches of Santa Genus V, inhaling the heady sea vapours. You can sleep under it beneath the stars which shine so redly on the desert world of Kakafun. Use it to sail a mini raft down the slow, heavy river Moth. Wet it for use in hand-to-hand combat. Wrap it around your head to ward off noxious fumes, or to avoid the gaze of the ravenous bug-blatter beast of Traal. A mind-bogglingly stupid animal, it assumes that if you can't see it, it can't see you. Daft as a brush, but very ravenous. You can wave your towel in emergencies as a distress signal, and of course dry yourself off with it if it seems to be clean enough. More importantly, a towel has immense psychological value. For some reason, if a strag is a non-hitchhiker, discovers that a hitchhiker has his towel with him, well, he will automatically assume that he is also in possession of a toothbrush, face flannel, soap, tin of biscuits, flask, compass, map, ball of string, gnat spray, wet weather gear, spacesuit, etc., etc. Furthermore, the strag will then happily lend the hitchhiker any of these, or a dozen other items that the hitchhiker might accidentally have lost. When What the Strag will think is that any man who can hitchhike the length and breadth of the galaxy, rough it, slum it, struggle against terrible odds, win through and still know where his towel is clearly a man to be reckoned with. Hence a phrase which has passed into hitchhiking slang as in, "Hey, you sass, that hoopy Ford prefect. There's a frood who really knows where his towel is." Sass, Sass meaning know, be aware of, meet, have sex with. Hoopy meaning really together guy. Frood meaning really amazing together guy. Nestling quietly on top of the towel in Ford Prefect's satchel, the sub-etha-sens-o-matic began to wink more quickly. Miles above the surface of the planet, the huge yellow somethings began to fan out. At Jodrell Banks, someone decided it was time for a nice relaxing cup of tea. What's going on with my camera? Oh, there. "You got a towel with you?" said Ford Prefect suddenly to Arthur. Arthur, struggling through his third pint, looked round at him. "Why? What? No. Should I have?" He had given up on being surprised. There didn't seem to be any point any longer. Ford clicked his tongue in an irritation. "Drink up," he urged. At that moment, the dull sound of rumbling crash from outside filtered through the low murmur of the pub, through the sound of a jukebox, through the sound of a man next to Ford hiccuping over the whisky Ford had eventually bought him. Arthur choked on his beer, leapt to his feet. "What's that?" he yelled. "Don't worry," said Ford. "They haven't started yet." "Thank God for that," said Arthur and relaxed. "It's probably just your house being knocked down," said Ford, downing his last pint. "What?" said Arthur. Suddenly Ford's spell was broken. Arthur looked wildly around him and ran to the window. "Oh my God, they are! They're knocking down my house! What the hell am I doing in the pub, Ford?" "It hardly makes any difference at this stage," said Ford. "Let them have their fun." "Fun?" yelped Arthur. "Fun?" He quickly checked out of the window again that they were talking about the same thing. "Damn their fun!" he hooted, ran out of the pub furiously waving a near-empty beer glass. He made no friends at all in the pub that lunchtime. "Stop, you vandals! You home wreckers!" bawled Arthur. "You half-crazed Visigoths! Stop with you!" Ford would have to go after him. Turning quickly to the barman, he asked for 4 packets of peanuts. "There you are, sir," said the barman, slapping the packets on the bar. 28 pence, if you'd be so kind." Ford was very kind. He gave the barman another £5 note and told him to keep the change. The barman looked at it and then looked at Ford. He suddenly shivered. He experienced a momentary sensation that he didn't understand, because no one on earth had ever experienced it before. In moments of great stress, every life form that exists gives out a tiny subliminal signal. The signal simply communicates an exact and almost pathetic sense of how far that being is from the place of his birth. On earth, it is never possible to be further than 16,000 miles from your birthplace, which really isn't very far, so such signals are too minute to be noticed. Ford Prefect was at this moment under great stress, and he was born 600 light-years away in the near vicinity of Betelgeuse. The barman reeled for a moment, hit by a shocking, incomprehensible sense of distance. He didn't know what it meant, but he looked at Ford Prefect with a new sense of respect, almost awe. "Are you serious, sir?" he said in a small whisper, which had the effect of silencing the pub. "You think the world's going to end?" "Yes," said Ford. "But this afternoon?" Ford had recovered himself. He was at his flippest. "Yes," he said gaily. "In less than 2 minutes, I would estimate." The barman couldn't believe the conversation he was having, but he couldn't believe the sensation he had just had either. "Isn't there anything we can do, then?" he said. "No, nothing," said Ford, stuffing the peanuts into his pockets. Someone in the hush bar suddenly laughed raucously at how stupid everyone had become. The man sitting next to Ford was a bit sozzled now. His eyes waved their way up to Ford. "I thought," he said, "if the world was going to end, meant to lie down or put a paper bag on our head or something." "If you like, yes," said Ford. "That's what they told us in the army," said the man, and his eyes began the long trek back down to his whisky. "Will that help?" said the barman. "No," said Ford. He gave him a friendly smile. "Excuse me, I've got to go." And with a wave he left. The pub was silent for a moment longer, and then, embarrassingly enough, the man with a raucous laugh did it again. The girl he had dragged along to the pub with him had grown to loathe him dearly over the last hour or so, and it would probably have been a great satisfaction to her to know that in a minute and a half or so he would suddenly evaporate into a whiff of hydrogen, ozone, and carbon monoxide. However, when the moment came, she would be too busy evaporating herself to notice. The barman cleared his throat. He heard himself say, "Last orders, please." The huge yellow machines began to sink downward and to move faster. Ford knew they were there. This wasn't the way he had wanted it. Running up the lane, Arthur had nearly reached his house. He didn't notice how cold it had become. He didn't notice the wind. He didn't notice the sudden irrational squall of rain. He didn't notice anything but the caterpillar bulldozer crawling over the rubble that had been his home. "You barbarians!" he yelled. "I'll sue the council for every penny it's got. I'll have you hung, drawn, and quartered, and whipped, and boiled, until you've had enough." Ford was running after him very fast, very, very fast. "And then I'll do it again," yelled Arthur. "And then when I've finished, I'll take all the little bits, and I'll jump on them." Arthur didn't notice that the men were running from the bulldozers. He didn't notice that Mr. Prosser was staring hectically into the sky. What Mr. Prosser had noticed was that the huge yellow somethings were screaming through the clouds, impossibly huge yellow somethings. "And I'll carry on jumping on them," yelled Arthur, still running, "until I get blisters, or I can't think of anything even more unpleasant to do, and then—" Arthur tripped and fell headlong, rolled and landed flat on his back. At last he noticed that something was going on. His finger shot upward. "What the hell's that?" he shrieked. That's the end of this part, and I'm going to have to do the next part of this chapter in another vlog.